dating? Sort of, kind of.
No.
What happened to that guy that wanted to marry you?
They all want to marry you. Which one are you talking about? No, I'm kidding.
The entrepreneur, mom, deal maker, and the advocate. These are all exterior titles, but who am I when I peel the layers back? Unlayered with Chandra Cologne.
So I'm sitting here this evening with Lars Lofstrand. He is an author, a teacher, a trainer. Is there a difference?
Trainer, coach, you can call it whatever you want.
Ex-rock star, mentor, guru, training guru. I mean, now I'm just making stuff up, but no, you really are. Lars and I have known one another for, at least 7 years.
7, 8 years, maybe even more.
Yeah, maybe
years,
even more.
9 years, maybe.
So I have to tell you why I want to interview you.
Yeah.
I feel like you've lived 9 lives. And
let's call it 7. I need
you need to? Yes. And I feel like there's some similarities there between you and I. I think that you reinvent yourself over and over and over again. And I think that's so critical to success. And later on, I'm going to ask you to define what success means to you. I myself have also done the same thing, reinvented myself over the years. And as I mentioned right before we started filming, I personally feel like I'm in the best place of my life. Just so the audience knows, I actually wrote my questions down on old school index cards with the ring, because I think Lars and I could sit here and talk, until midnight, and we don't have that much
so to keep
battery.
Us on track.
And so this is actually to keep us on track to the best of our ability. But, ebb and flow, like we're going to go with it. But I didn't want to walk away and feel like, dang, I should have asked him that. Oh, I forgot to ask him that. So there are some key points that I want us to get to. This is about entrepreneurship. And in my opinion, that encompasses everything. And I dare say that you and I would both agree that we believe everything is spiritual. Business.
Yeah, very much so.
Personal relationships, wealth, health, it all goes together. So the first thing I want to ask you is, did you consciously or unconsciously decide to become an entrepreneur?
Probably unconsciously. I've always been an entrepreneur, I'd say. And I know I say that word slightly different to you guys, but I think I've always been an entrepreneur. I've only really had, I would say, 2 jobs. I had a job when I was 15. I worked at an ice cream store, and I ended up running that ice cream store and the entire, he had a couple of branches. And then I went to work for my father, and he fired me, and he said that you shouldn't have a job, you need to open your own business. And I haven't had a job since then, So I think you either have it or you don't,
And what is that habit? Like, what is the it that you're referring to?
I think it's, it's a restlessness. It's, not wanting to settle, not wanting to, be under somebody else's rules, So I think as entrepreneurs, we pretty much, I like to think we kind of rule breakers, I mean, I see my one daughter, I don't know what it is. You can't really put your finger on, but she's got it.
A little bit of a rebel.
Yeah, a little bit of a rebel. But not only that, she buys and sells things, and she's got that entrepreneurial spirit. She's now at college, and I'm afraid that might kill that spirit in her, because I'm not a huge fan of college per se.
Right.
I think it's okay, if you're a certain type of person.
Sure.
But certain people I don't think should go to college, because I think college puts you in a box, And as an entrepreneur, you cannot be in a box.
Would you say now college, and because we live in a society that actually now, matter of fact, glorifies entrepreneurship. Everybody's popping bottles, everyone's driving a Ferrari, all the marketing, branding, all the fun stuff, right? And so I feel like now, even for the kiddos that go to college, with technology and social media, I almost feel like they can be a hybrid of both. Now, probably not a grand percentage of them, because that's capacity. which, by the way, you owned a company at one time called the Capacity Company, which I've always loved that because it is about growing capacity. And most people have a very limited capacity. But I think there are some young people out there that have the ability to go through college and still run a business, you know, on the internet and do these things that we didn't have that growing up. It's you were out like throwing newspapers, and that was your first kind of feel at entrepreneurship, or working in a parent's business, or for the ladies, it was selling Mary Kay, right? There are all these different, I don't know if they had that in South Africa, but you know, over here, Mary Kay, Avon, all the different
we had
makeup.
Avon, I think we didn't have Mary Kay.
Yes, and so that kind of allowed women to stick their toe into entrepreneurship because they really targeted housewives. So I don't know. I think this generation may surprise us a little bit.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I see what you're saying. I mean, college is a scary thing. You know, I've got one in college, and I feel like I do the best I can to show him my world, to show him his older brother's world. That you have choices. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's most important, is that our kids have choices. And I don't feel like I had that growing up. So it feels good to say, you can do this or you can do this. You can pick.
I think we've got too many choices sometimes.
I would
That's
agree.
The problem.
I would agree.
So we get distracted very easily, you know?
I can see that.
So, yeah.
So you're a little worried about the one in college.
Yeah, a little bit, you know.
Is that Lucy?
No, that's Lucy's gone. I think Lucy will do good at college. It's Jasmine.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. She's changing now. She's changing colleges, so we'll see how that goes, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't want to say too much because I'm watching very carefully what's going on there, you know? But she's got that entrepreneurial spirit in her, you know? And I think you either have it or not. I think you can develop it, but I think you have to have that initial spark, you know? So, because it's not easy to be an entrepreneur, you know that?
It is absolutely not. Despite what social media will show you, there are some times where you really second guess if you should have ever gone out on your own. So tell me about a time, and I know there's a lot because you've owned a lot of businesses. Matter of fact, how many businesses have you owned?
I think I'm 22 now.
22.
Yeah, number 22. So not all successful, but, you know, I learned more in the failures than I did in the successes.
What one surprised you that it took off the way it did?
The brokerage was a bit of a surprise. That was a good one. You know, it didn't end as well, but, you know, being in real estate, that was a different one. You know, it was something out of my wheelhouse, you know, something I hadn't done before, something totally foreign, but, you know, Andre and I picked up on it pretty quickly, you know.
And then what one failed that you would have never thought in a million years would have failed?
I had a coffee shop that I opened. It was a furniture and a coffee shop together because we owned this furniture store with a guy, a furniture manufacturer, and we combined it with a coffee shop. It was very contemporary, modern furniture, and that one didn't do too well. But I think it was, you know, it wasn't because the business was bad. I think the key part in any business is the people.
Right.
And, you know, I learned a valuable lesson. Actually, a friend of mine who was a judge in South Africa, you know, we got in with this guy and, you know, he wasn't that honest. And, I shouldn't say he wasn't that honest. He just did things differently than what we did. And, you know, it failed as a result. And I remember asking him, I said, you know, how can I've been in business with this guy. Did I attract that? Did I attract that person who didn't have the same values as me? And I said, because that's the law of attraction, you know? He said, yes, but the law of attraction is two sides of a coin. The other side of the law of attraction is the law of repulsion. So just because I made a bad decision, the law of attraction would tell me whether we would attract or not, you know?
Right.
So because of the decision, we got together, but that's not really the law of attraction. That's just making a decision to get together. Right. Staying together is what the law of attraction becomes, you know? And because we weren't the same, didn't have the same values, we ended up repelling each other, you know?
Yeah.
So I believe that the law of attraction also has that law of repulsion with it, you know? Which is good because that protects you from, you know, getting in with the wrong people.
Right.
But, you know, people are the key thing in business. I would say that that's the number one, you know. I think Jim Collins said it the best. He wrote the book Good to Great, and he said, first who, then what.
Right.
So, you know, we tend to choose the what before the who, but the who's the most important, because if you've got the right people on board, I mean, you can literally do anything, you know. Like Andre and I.
Yes.
I mean, we've done a couple
Batman
of businesses.
and Robin.
Yeah. So.
And two very different people.
Yeah.
You know, which is
But
important because we tend to try to partner with people. You know? Similar values. Yeah. But what I think a lot of young entrepreneurs do early on is you tend to want to partner with people that are just like you. Mm-hmm. You know, you're both outgoing, you're both this, you're both whatever. And those tend to not be the best
I think I agree with you. I think you
partnerships.
You got to bring different things to the table, you know, otherwise you're just duplicating yourself.
Right.
So, which is important if you're going to duplicate a business.
Right.
But if you're in on one business, if you're doing the same thing, you know, why join with somebody who doesn't bring different strengths?
Exactly.
You know? So, yeah.
At what point in your journey did you really start getting into the personal development side of things and start studying the profiling and personalities and all the things that, you know, you taught us at the brokerage when we were both in real estate?
Also, you know, I've always been interested in personal development, but I really got into it. So I came to America and, well, let me back it up a bit. So when I was probably, I think I'd just come out of the army. So I was, what was that, about 21 years old. And my dad put me on this course because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a little bit lost. And he put me on this course and I repeated this course because I enjoyed it so much 6 times, you know, and I'm a slow learner. So I repeated it 6 times, and I would say that that's when my journey into personal development started. Although I hadn't picked it up as a business, that's what got me interested in personal development, you know, the psychology about how, you know, people think, you know, and how it relates to what it is that they do. And then I came to America, opened a chemical company which failed. And then I was headhunted by this company that sold profiles or did profiling, psychological profiling, and I joined them. And I became Rookie of the Year, and you know, I loved doing it so much that I ended up taking kind of like not a branch, but a franchise of it back to South Africa.
Okay.
And I ran that for a year, but then I sold it. I got offered, you know, good money for it, so I sold it. So I'm always into buying and selling companies, you know.
Sure.
So I sold it, and but then I met a guy who became a mentor of mine called Alan Chazen, and he was in the personal development space in South Africa. He was like a guru in South Africa at the time. I think he started off with a guy called Paul J. Mayer, if I remember correctly, and Paul J. Mayer was also connected to this company that did the profiling, and that's kind of how I got into being in the actual business of personal development and coaching. Mm-hmm. So, and that was 2002, somewhere around there.
So
what's that,
I went
10, 20 years ago? 20 years. I mean, this is 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
And you're still teaching the material.
Yeah.
So, it's stuck. It has stood the test of time because it's still very relevant.
Truth as the nature of truth is that it's the same yesterday, today, as will be tomorrow, you know, so it doesn't change.
Right.
So,
tell me a little bit about, you know, when we choose to go down the personal development route, it's very jarring. There's a sifting, right? And if you allow the process to do what it's supposed to do within you, then you can't unsee what you've seen, what you've learned. And at one part of my journey, I felt like, man, everyone I meet, I'm almost doing this assessment subconsciously, right? And then I started to think, my goodness, am I becoming like hypercritical? Because you can see all of these things, right? And so how did you overcome, or have you overcome using the knowledge and wisdom at this point in your journey, 20 plus years, when you meet someone, and I would dare to say in the first probably 10 minutes, you've got this general synopsis going on in your head of like what they're about and who they are. How do you control that and just allow people to just be without putting those judgments on them from what we've learned?
You know, I think in the beginning you may be a little bit judgmental. You know, here's the nature of knowledge. You know, knowledge can be a blessing or a curse.
Yes.
And it's a blessing or a curse because, or it can be a curse because, you know, before you had the knowledge, you didn't know that you had to do something. Now when you learn you have to do it, now every time you don't do it, it becomes the very thing, that knowledge becomes the stick that you end up beating yourself up with, you know?
Yeah.
And not only that, when you get that knowledge, you know, you can have the tendency to beat up other people, you know, because it's easier to beat up somebody else than it is to beat up yourself. But what I have found is that the more knowledge you have, I would say, in my experience, is, you know, although initially you might be a little bit more judgmental because you kind of know more than somebody else does. But I found that as I get to know things, you know, you get a better understanding of somebody. And I think, you know, prejudice comes from not understanding somebody, and prejudice comes from somebody being different. But that being different is just really a lack of knowledge, you know. So when you learn and you get that knowledge, I think you actually become more, you have more grace for people.
Yes.
Because you kind of understand why they're doing what they do.
Yes.
And especially when you start understanding motive and people's real motives, you know, you kind of actually, your heart softens towards people. And I think, you know, in the beginning, I kind of would catch myself not being judgmental, but judging a situation. And when I say judging, I don't mean it as a negative way, because everybody judges, and, we're required to have judgment.
Yes.
Although we're not judging somebody, you know, we're required to, you know, not walk down a dark alley. Why? Because that's a judgment call.
Right.
So that's necessary for survival. But I think, yeah, you do. You definitely have more grace for people the more you learn about them and the more you understand why somebody does what they do, you know. And that's what becomes interesting, because I think that is, at the end of the day, motive is everything. And that's kind of what I've learned. You know, we tend to judge people when we don't understand motive, then we judge the act. But if you understand why somebody did something behind, like the reason behind the act, you have grace for them, you know, because I've realized we're all the same. You know, we're all in the same boat.
Absolutely. So. And I agree with everything that you just said, because I can attest to early on in my journey, you know, I felt like I was hypercritical. Mm-hmm. And then I have also found that if you're called to teach, to empower, to inspire, and to work with people, you are asking for more lessons from the universe to come into your own life. And I almost feel like life became more difficult for a while there. And I think it was to prepare me and to rid me of that critical spirit so that I could get to a place of grace and what you're speaking to. Because if you don't get there, you haven't progressed at all. Well, because it's all about, it's about grace and understanding what you said, like why people are doing what they're doing. And there's a reason. They may not even know it. Sometimes we do. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. You know, but most people don't.
Yeah, most people don't.
And when you study and study, like I know you have, and you know, even to this day, I'm constantly studying about, you know, trauma and the psychology behind things, and just to sharpen. And I just find that, wow, we do so many things, you know, unconsciously, and things that derive from being as young as a 2-year-old, that we don't even know how that's impacting our life today, unless you're intentionally studying this.
Well, I think that's the thing, you know. I think if we're constantly learning, I mean, I love that quote. Alvin Toffler's credited with it, but I know it's another guy that put two quotes together. I just don't remember his name, so I always accredited Toffler, but he says that learners will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. So basically what he's saying is that the learned will find themselves, so people who know some stuff, they find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists.
Right.
And the reason being is, I think this is where we can become judgmental is, if we get a little bit of knowledge and we box it off, I think that's when we can become critical. But if you're constantly learning and letting go of the learning that no longer serves you, because it's really growth, what serves you today may not serve you tomorrow.
Absolutely.
The challenge is, the human being tends to hold on to that learning, box it off.
Yes.
We even, going back to talking about college, we get a degree and we put that degree on the wall.
Yes.
And now we box off, I know a lot, so now I stop learning
Right.
because I think, I know enough to get by,
Right.
And when in actual fact, one of the constants in life is change,
Yes.
And if you're not changing, life by default will change you because it's going to change regardless of whether you don't or not.
Yeah.
And that's when, Alvin Toffler says that's why we get left behind. They'll find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists because the world, that change will continue and the world moves on and we get left behind.
Yes.
And that's a lot of people. And that's, I think, the challenge I see with degrees and people becoming learned, they stop learning. And I think learning is the most important part, And I think if you keep learning, that's when you reach that place of grace. That's when you reach that place of understanding where your heart gets softened for people, So.
And I think too, it allows you to have a backup plan, right? So you have that degree, and it's like, well, there's something consciously where you're like, this is my security, right? But you and I know there's no such thing as security.
No, not at all.
And if you tell yourself there's a security blanket to fall back on, then it changes your mindset, right? Versus those of us who don't have a backup plan, didn't have the luxury of a backup plan, know that we might have to take that leap off that cliff. There's a certain, I believe what sets entrepreneurs apart from others is courage. It's just courage. A lot of the magic I feel like I see in people, it's their courage. I see it in my oldest son. He has the courage to try a new thing, and I love that. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Just even when he calls me, he's like, Mom, I just invested it in a business. I'm like, what is it? And then he tells me what it is. I'm like, okay. I just, it's inspiring. And you inspire so many people by just doing your own damn thing. And it doesn't have to be something grandiose. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to be some multi-million-dollar business, It's in the little things, Okay, let me get back. Okay. So here's the definition of a defining moment. A defining moment is a point in life where you're urged to make a pivotal decision. What were your top 3 in the last decade where you had to make a pivotal decision? It was a defining moment.
Man, that is hard to pinpoint, but I do have some life things that happen. I think sometimes, I don't think it's something we choose, but rather there's something that chooses us, whether it's fate or God-given or however you want to look at it. But I think certain things happen to us for a reason. And I know when they happen, we often look at them and think, why is this happening to me?
Yes.
When I've always, I try to teach and coach my clients to say, don't ask why it's happening, but rather ask, what is life requiring me to learn?
Yes.
And I think if you have that learning, back to that learning mindset, I think you'll get the message from what that life moment is trying to teach you. Otherwise, you'll keep getting the lesson over and over again. But to answer your question,
packaged differently.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's the same lesson, but it might come in a different package. But I think defining moments, there's probably 3 or 4. Number one was, one of my main ones, I think, was I came to America and I invested in a chemical venture. I had some Dutch guys that partnered and an American guys that partnered. And, I'm in South Africa, we're very handshake kind of people, handshake's a deal. And I learned in America, you can't do a handshake. You've got to have a
legal contract.
Which is good, which is, actually prudent to do. And that's something I learned. But the Americans pulled out of the deal, and as a result, the Dutch guys pulled out, and I was left holding the can, and I invested everything. I invested $1 million, and I'd lost that, you know. But I would say that that's a defining moment for me, because I literally couldn't even put food on the table, and it was the first time I was away from my security blanket in South Africa, which, you know, had a father there, mother there, family there that you could fall back on. But now it's, you know, thousands of miles away, and kind of had to fend for myself, you know. So that was a defining moment for me. The second one, I would say, was I got really sick, which, you know, about 4 years ago, you know, and I almost died a few times. And that's literally changed how I think and how I see things, which I don't know if that's always good or not, because I've lost some of the lust that I had for business. I lost some of that drive I had, because I realized the things I'm chasing, they just, they don't have real value, you know? So I'm still at a place where I'm trying to decide what I want to do, you know, as a result of having that knowledge. That was a big one. And then the third one is probably getting divorced, because that kind of changed how I see relationships, you know? And I was always in the relationship business. So that was a wake-up call, and I learned a lot about myself because of that, because, you know, those kinds of things, all three of them, they humble you, you know?
Yes.
And, they, you know, humility is an important thing. I mean, if you look in the Bible, not to preach or anything, but if you look in the Bible, when people got proud, they were humbled, you know, so they became teachable again. And that's what I tell people. The word humble simply means to be teachable. If you look at, you know, if you have pride, you're not teachable, you're trying to teach. So I always say, you know, always remain the pupil, you know, and when the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear. And I think, you know, the teacher comes in different forms of, you know, it's people, situations, being sick, divorce, you know, losing a business, those kinds of things, I think, are teaching moments. So there's a lot of teachers in our lives that we don't realize. And the reason being is because we're trying to be the teacher. We're trying to, you know, teach all the time, when in actual fact we should be the pupil, you know. So that's my view on being an entrepreneur too. I think that the greatest entrepreneurs were always the greatest pupils. Right. So, which I think is important.
So the divorce came before the illness.
Yes.
From what I remember.
Yeah. Well, the divorce, technically the divorce came after, but the breakup came before.
Yes.
So it was just part of the process, getting divorced.
The divorce is a technicality, but you were already apart. Do you feel like the impact of the divorce is what brought on the illness?
Definitely helped.
Your emotional and where you were at spiritually at that time. Do you see the correlation between the two?
100%. So at the time, I was going through a loss of a business. At the same time, I was going through, you know, the divorce. And those two things had a huge impact, you know, and definitely were part of, because what I had was caused by stress, you know.
Yes.
And I don't think it was that per se. That was kind of maybe the crowning moment, because I'd been stressed for many years, and I think it was that build-up. And that was kind of the last straw, the last two straws that broke the camel's back, you know. But in hindsight, I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world, because I've learned so much from it.
Right.
And that's the irony, you know. Right. So, you know, and that's why I was saying, I'll say it again, is, you know, don't ask why this is happening to me, but rather what is life requiring me to learn. And I think if we have that attitude, then we get the lesson, you know. Yeah. And hopefully we don't get it over and over again, because we're not learning it, you know. So.
Right. So tell me a little bit about, right now, I heard you say a second ago, you're trying to decide what you want to do. I love that. We're going to pause right there and take a quick break.
Okay.
So what chapter would you say this is for you? And what are you considering doing?
That's the $1 million question. But I am looking at, there's a couple of things. So obviously I'm still doing the coaching and training. I've kind of, if I'm very frank with you, I got a little bit of tired of that. You know, everybody now is a coach. Anybody who's got a cell phone and a social media account's a coach, a business coach. They've never owned a business or never run a business, but they're a business coach.
Right.
So it's not as unique as it was before. And also, I kind of got a little bit burnt out on it. And I also think, most people who get into the personal development space, they're really getting into it because they're trying to fix something within themselves.
Yes.
And for some reason, I feel I've learned the lesson that I need to have gotten from being in the personal development. So I'm not as passionate about it as I was before, although I love doing it and I love teaching.
Right.
But as a business per se, I'm not as passionate about it. I'd rather give it away and do it for free. But I'm looking at Airbnb arbitrage.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard about that.
I have.
So I've been looking into that, and that's something I'd love to do. I've dabbled a little bit with Airbnb. I had one a few years ago. It did really well, and the lease ended, and I'm thinking about doing that again, because I used to do flip houses, and I'm not interested in doing that anymore.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about doing something, like that. But I don't know. I'm also thinking, I'd like to do something where I maybe take the intellectual property I have and I can put it online somehow. I'm just from the generation that, we taught face-to-face. We didn't do stuff online. So I'm trying to transition onto line and, online and start to understand it. But I'd love to do something where I can live anywhere in the world and do it,
Yeah,
So
that'd be great.
Yeah.
So you said something a moment ago, so I'm going to take us back just a little bit. You said that you've always lived with stress. And one thing that I've learned through my own battles, if you will, and through my own therapy sessions is that most entrepreneurs are actually functioning with a high level of anxiety. We don't even know we're stressed out. We've just
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life.
Yeah, it's become a way of life.
And
that takes a toll on you, though.
Absolutely. And you just don't even know it. You just go, 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 go. And I think for a long time, I didn't even realize that, even with the training, even with the coaching, even all of that I was living with high functioning anxiety, and that I still had a hustle mentality. And I want to touch on that because I think that there's a time in our lives where we have to transition from that hustler's mindset. And I come from a time, I'm just a tad bit younger than you, but like being a hustler, having a hustler mentality was like the thing, right? It was like, that means you're a badass. You're a hustler. You know how to make money. You know how to get money. You can, flip the houses, do this, sell the MLM product, work the 9 to 5. And now I'm so anti the hustle.
Yeah, I am too.
Can you talk to the hustle and where it really comes from? Because
you see,
I know.
Yeah, I think the hustle, we chasing stuff, and the stuff we own ends up owning us, and that's what I've learned. With that near-death experience I had, I realized what was really important. I mean, hey, if you look at this, I wear this Rolex. I got this Rolex when I think I was 20 or 21. It was my first royalty check. I was playing in the band. We made a lot of money, and I bought it. And I'll never forget. I thought I was. I've made it now. And I went home, and I'll never forget my dad's reaction. And he said to my dad, and my dad's been very successful in his life, and he looked at my watch and he says, where did you get that watch from? So I said, I just bought it. So he says, well, why are you wearing it? So I said, well, I kind of made it. I've got this watch. He says, and I'll never forget this. He says, you haven't earned the right to wear that watch. And, that kind of hit me hard because I wanted him to be proud of me for buying the watch. And, to hear that from your dad, hey, you haven't earned the right to wear that watch. Anyway, cut a long story short, many, many years later, and I mentioned it, I came here, I lost a lot of money in a chemical company venture. And I couldn't put food on the table, and I had to go and ask my dad. I said, because I needed to feed the family. I said, hey, Dad, I need to loan some money from you. And I'll never forget, he was visiting us here in America, and he said to me, well, I'm not going to loan you any money. But he said, I'll buy that watch off you. And, I'm going to get emotional about this. But he bought the watch off me, and I can't remember what he bought it for, but, he gave me a couple of $1,000 or whatever it was worth. And I'll never forget it. That was the first time I was here in America, and then I came back 10 years later, the second time. So this must have been about 15 years later. I'll never forget. I wasn't doing as well as I was before financially, but I was more in tune with myself. I was more in tune with life. I had a greater understanding of life and how life worked. And I'll never forget, there was a box under the Christmas tree they came to visit, Mm-hmm. And I opened this box and there was my damn Rolex watch in the box, But it wasn't the watch that I cared about, although I still wear it today, and I'll tell you why. But there was a note in that box that basically said, you've earned the right to wear this watch now. And I wear this watch every day. I hate this watch, but I wear it every day because it reminds me of who I was and, who I've become, through my dad's eyes. And I've, spent my whole life trying to impress my dad, and that's why I get emotional about it. But that's the day when I learned, what's really important, and it's not the stuff, the stuff we own ends up owning us. And, probably since then I've been spending my time getting rid of stuff. I'm becoming minimalist, because it's not important. The challenge with that is that you lose that hustle culture that people have. But if you look at that hustle culture, it's driven by, wanting more and more and more money, and it's just, it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. There's more important things. Changing people's lives is more important than the money you make from it. But unfortunately, you do need money, because we're in the world we're in. So, but what is your thoughts about that, on that hustle culture? I'm interested to hear what you think.
Oh, gosh, I don't want to tell you, but you said something that's so big and so important and vulnerable. You said you spent your whole life trying to prove to your dad that you were good enough. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did you realize that?
When I got that note.
Huge.
When I got that note.
Got the note.
Yeah. When I earned the right to wear this damn watch. So I wear it, but I don't wear it because I necessarily like the watch. I wear it because it's become a symbol of something. Mm-hmm. And I'll hand this watch down to my son, so now it's become something, because he's literally, although I bought it and he got it, he's handed it back down to me. So it's becoming something that's going to be handed down. My son's already eyeing it out, wanting it. So probably at 21, I'll give him that watch, and he wouldn't have earned the right to wear the watch.
Right.
But, hopefully, he'll be a better man than I ever was. And that's, I think what every father hopes is that, their son, is better than what they were,
Right. Have you accepted yourself?
Yeah. I think for the first time in a long time. So that's why I say I don't have that drive to do personal development so much anymore, because I was literally, you think you get into the business to help people. Yeah. But you're literally in the business to help yourself. And then when you find yourself, you no longer have that need as you did before to, not that you don't want to help others, but, because you're constantly thinking
the drive behind it is different.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah.
You lose that. Once you get that lesson, it's, it becomes almost obsolete.
Right.
You're doing the personal development, with the excuse of helping other people. That's really to help yourself,
So would you say it was 40 plus years before you got to a place of, I'm not looking for his acceptance anymore?
Yeah.
You realized that he already accepted you, loved you just how you were. That it was really you needing to accept you.
Exactly. Well, I think that's most of us in life. Most of us wanting to be accepted by somebody else, but it's really, it doesn't matter if somebody accepts you. If you can't accept yourself, you can't accept
the
that
acceptance.
They do. Yeah, you can't accept that they do accept you. They do love you. If you don't love yourself, it's impossible to be.
You'll reject that 100%. Acceptance of you over and over
100%.
and over again.
And that's the thing about loving self. If you don't love yourself, you can't give it. But more importantly, you can't accept it. Right. So the very thing you want, which is love, is the very thing you push away.
Yes.
Because you can't accept it, you know?
Yes.
So that is definitely a lesson I've learned. And that, I can tell you, that's probably in the last year, maybe two, that I've really come full circle on that, you know? Like really, really. And that's why I say, I'm trying to reinvent myself now and decide what is it I want to do, because I'm no longer chasing the things I used to, They're just not important. I mean, the things we worry about, the things I stressed about for years and years that made me sick.
Yes.
In the greater scheme of things, they're not important.
Right.
We think they are, but they're not. Have a near-death experience and you learn who's important, what's important,
Yes. So I'll answer your question regarding the hustle culture. I can say for me, it came from survival. It was ingrained in me from a very young age. And so hustle was all about a survival mindset. There was nothing healthy about it. And man, I was good at it. I was good at it because I had to be. You know, who else was going to take care of me? Nobody.
Yeah.
You know, so you learn how to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means you got to learn how to hustle.
Yeah.
So it's hard to shed it and to let it go. But the motive behind it is not always good. And you don't even realize that it's not good. And
Well,
it's not good. It's just not good for you. And most likely you're using someone to get something.
Yeah.
It's always an exchange.
Yeah,
And I
always.
learned that
Yeah.
from you and Andre
Yeah.
when you guys really conditioned us to understand there's always an exchange. Good, bad, whatever, you know, there's always an exchange.
Well, we're by nature selfish, you know, and
Yes.
most of us will never admit that because it's been demonized to be selfish. But I think you get a righteous selfishness, which
Yes.
means, you know, you do have to look after yourself, you know, in order, I have to love myself in order to love you.
Right.
But, you know, I think the negative force, the devil, whatever you want to call it, teaches us that, you know, oh, you can't love yourself because that's selfish, but it's essential to love yourself.
Yes.
Because you can't love others if you don't love yourself,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And I think that's kind of the key is self-love is definitely important. But, you know, I think practicing loving somebody else is what becomes key too, you know?
Yeah.
Forget yourself and just love others. But at the
Yes.
same time, work on yourself so that when you do get love in return, because frankly, that's why we're doing it, you know? We all want love.
Yes.
We all have a selfish motive. Nobody
Yes.
does things truly unselfishly, you know. Some people will say they do, but, you know,
Right.
we're not
Right.
unconditional beings. We're absolute conditional beings. So, yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to point out, and it goes along with what we were talking about, you coming full circle and getting to a place where you've now feel like you truly accept yourself. One of the things that I was thinking about this week regarding my journey is for the first time in my life, I feel like I can sit with peace. Like I can coexist and settle into peace. And I can't say that I've ever been able to do that. Last year, this true peace that I've never felt before started to come into my life. And first it was like a insane storm. Everything around me was just like out of order in a lot of ways. And I was questioning a lot, and there was a lot of uncertainty, and I became very hypervigilant. And then this peace came right after it. And it actually threw me for a complete loop, and I went to therapy. And I can't say that that was the first time I've been to therapy. It was the first time I've been to therapy just for me. Before, it's because I'm there trying to work something out with somebody else, right? It's for a marriage. And now I'm going for the first time, and it's all about me, which feels uncomfortable because again, we're told like,
Well, you got to look at yourself, and we don't like what we
it
see
can't be all
of it,
about
yeah.
you, you know, and so you've got to sit in there, you got to talk about yourself, and you're like, oh God, you know, it's uncomfortable, right? But I learned that my brain had been conditioned for war, like literally from a very young age. I was accustomed to such high levels of chaos and dysfunction that when I was in peace, my brain didn't know how to react to peace. And so it would literally send off a warning signal and tell myself that something was wrong. So I would become hypervigilant, and it caused panic attacks. So peace, for me, caused panic attacks. Can you,
That's
that is
because you were so
amazing.
used to being at war.
So used
But
to
you know,
being
it's
at
a funny
war.
thing. I told somebody this the other day. You know, the reason we have war is so that we can know peace.
Yes, and that
So-
is exactly what happened to me. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time. You know, I don't. I fail. You know, look back at some things, you know, last week and go, oh, you know what, I could have handled that better. I could have, you know, so I'm always, you know, but I'm a lot less critical of self. And I'm at the most peace that I've ever been in my life. And people tell me, like, they can see it, they can feel it. They're like, you walk different, like everything, like there's this change, right? And it's because I finally have peace. And I have finally accepted myself, flaws and all. And I've accepted that I'm still a work in progress, you know, and that I still need grace, you know, from my family and my friends. And I'm not perfect, but I'm actually okay with that. Whereas before, there was always this unsettling. You know, this fear of what's
mature,
next.
You know?
Yeah, I've grown up a little bit here lately.
Well, you know, I think as entrepreneurs, you know, you talk about being at war. I think we, as entrepreneurs, we like some of that strife. We like that conflict, you know?
Yeah.
And I know I did, you know, I would always choose, you know, with being divorced, I dated a little bit, and I would always choose somebody that would be at war with me, you know, because that's what I was used to, being at war.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, you know, I think we all at the end of the day looking for that peace or peace of mind, you know, and I think that's, you know, no amount of money can buy that kind of peace you have, you know, and when you get it, I think that's the true measure of success, is having that peace, you know.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So as we wrap up, I'm going to kind of do like a little speed round here. Define what success looks like to you.
Well, I do this talk, you know, and at the beginning of the talk, I ask people to write down. So if you're listening to the podcast now, I want you to write down the word success. And I get people to write down the word success, and they write what their definition of success is. And then I'll go around the room and ask people, you know, what's their definition? And almost all people will come up with a dictionary definition. And this is what the Encarta dictionary says it is. They say that success is the achievement of something planned or attempted, especially the achievement of fame, wealth, and power. So that's what the dictionary deems as success. Here's the challenge I have with that. And this is what I always share, is that I get to meet people who've reached that definition of success, only to arrive there to feel unsuccessful. Or only to arrive there to feel unfulfilled or not at peace. So that's when I got thinking, you know, if that's the definition of success, it's a flawed definition of success. So to answer your question, what is the best definition of success? It was actually said by a guy called Walt Disney, which we know, you know, from Disneyland. Walt Disney said, and this to me is, I think, the greatest definition of success: would the child you were be proud of the adult you've become? Would the child you were be proud of the adult you've become? And that goes full circle to talking about, you know, wanting my dad to be proud of me, you know, from a young age. And, you know, I realized and got peace when I realized that it doesn't matter what I do or what I did, he was proud of me, you know. And I think that's what brings peace. But I think, would the child you were, you know, that you were when you were younger, be proud of who you've become? That to me is the true measure of success.
Favorite book? The past, because we're avid readers. Well, if you know of all time, then...
Well, I've got an all-time favorite book. It's a little book. It changed my life many, many years ago. I'd just come out of the army, and it was a book called, and it's still around, it's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It's very written Shakespearean, thee and thou. But, you know, you could probably read that little book in an hour, and that book there has wisdom in it. If you read, every time I read it, I learn something, you know. It's kind of like reading the scriptures. Every time you read them, you know, you get something new. You could have read that same passage, you know, 100 times, but you'll get something new from it every time, you know. So,
that's a great book. I've read it. I have it.
It's a great book. I give that to as many people as I can.
Actually, I think you recommended it to me, and that's why I have it.
I probably gave it to you.
Probably.
I buy there's one, you get different versions of, but I buy there's a little hard cover. It's a yellow cover. It looks like Jesus on the cover. I don't know if it is. It's this guy with a beard, but it kind of looks like Jesus. And you get it in the religious section. It's not a religious book per se, but the religious people kind of have adopted it, because it does talk about God. It talks about how we think, and you know, how blessings are God-given. And so, but he's, I think, known as the father of the personal development industry,
Okay.
James Allen.
I didn't realize
So,
that. Who has impacted your life the most?
Wow, that's difficult. I'd have to say my dad, probably. My dad and my mom. Yeah, I just went to visit them now, 3-4 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
You went back to the motherland.
Yeah, I realized how much they impacted my life just spending time with them this last time, And I think we learned some of those lessons a little bit too late, I think we appreciate our parents too late, because I'm watching my kids now, and I even tell my boys sometimes, I said, one day these things that I tell you, you're going to end up telling your son.
Yes.
You're going to end up saying the very things that you thought, your dad was corny for saying, and you'll catch yourself saying those exact same things because it's wisdom,
It's so true.
But I think we don't recognize it initially, especially when we're younger. When you're under 30, you're kind of bulletproof, you know more than anybody else.
Yes.
So that's why, I've always said with personal development, most people take to personal development when you're a little bit older. And that doesn't mean to say age per se. I mean, that's just generally because some people are, old and wise beyond their years.
Yes.
So especially if they've gone through hardships. But I think that's the key in life, going through hardships. I think, it's one of my favorite quotes, as friction sharpens a pencil, so adversity sharpens a man. We tend to look at adversity as a bad thing, but it's not. Mm-mm. It's actually a necessary thing. And that goes back to the war thing. We need war, we need conflict because it brings peace, We wouldn't recognize it without. It's just like we wouldn't know sweet without bitter. We wouldn't know sweet without salt, So, yeah.
So you taught me probably just a few years back, not too long ago, about the definition of passion and the correlation to suffering. Mm-hmm. What are you passionate about today?
Dang. Probably still learning. I'm passionate about truth, discovering truth and finding truth. I mean, if you look today, and that's why, I'm a little bit, I'm going to be very frankly, I'm very disillusioned with not life per se, but society, Society, it doesn't matter where you look, you don't know what truth is anymore. Because, one side will say this is true, the other side will say the exact opposite and say this is true. And, who do you believe? And I think that's why it's so important to understand not truth per se, but how to discover truth. And to discover truth, it just merely is to practice the principle that you learn, because by the fruits you will know. That saying, by the fruits you'll know. So what comes in return from practicing that, you'll know. So if it doesn't bear good fruit, then it wasn't true. If it bears good fruit, then, it obviously is true. And I think that's the process. And I think, that's why we tend to become wise in our later years, is just because of the nature of time passes and we bumping our heads, and we finally learn the lesson, because we don't always learn it the first time.
Yes.
We've got to bump our heads over and over again.
And we're supposed to be evolving at all times as much as possible. My oldest is having another baby, and when he had his first one, he was a teenager, older teenager, but nonetheless a teenager. And with this third one, he's in a completely different place in his life. He's truly a grown man. He's already raised 2. And he said, I'm already feeling some guilt because I know I'm going to be a different father with this one than I was with the first one.
Yeah.
And I had a very similar situation because my boys are 10 and a half years apart. But I thought about that, and I just thought, if you're the same father at 30, 31 that you were when you were 19, something's wrong. We're supposed to be evolving. And of course, you're going to have a completely different parenting style, more patience, that's healthy, and that's life. But yet we feel guilty as parents as we grow and evolve, and our children get different versions of us. And being okay with that, or accepting it, I should say, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow when you have those age gaps.
Well, I think we wish we like, I was telling something the other day, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Right.
And I think that's maybe what brings a little bit of the regret, it's like, oh man, I wish I'd done things differently.
Sure.
But I mean, that's how we learn. That's just life, you know. And I think learning to let go of, you know, worry, learning to let go of not being perfect, learning to let go of not being the person we thought we were. That's okay. It's okay not to be perfect, you know. But I think the key is learning to let go. That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, our kids, you know, I think we tend to try to shelter our kids too much. They'll be okay. They bounce, you know, they bounce back easily, you know.
Yes.
Despite us. And, you know, what's going to happen in life, I believe, is going to happen. And I think, you know, relinquishing control and trying to control things in our lives, I think that's the key to success right there.
Yeah.
Especially being an entrepreneur too, you know, we try to control things, and very few things in our lives are truly controllable. Very few.
Very few.
We can control very few things.
Yes.
I mean, I can't think of more than one or two things that we're actually in control of. And I think one of them is just, you know, the only thing we really control is our attitude towards what happens to us in life. And that's why I go back to that saying, it's not what happens to us in life, but how we choose to deal with it.
Yeah.
So ask not why this is happening, but rather what is life requiring me to learn? Because one thing we're going to do, whether we like it or not, is going to learn.
Yep.
So I think that's probably the thing I'm most passionate about, is the learning.
So if you could leave us with one thing, and I know this is going to be hard, but one of the things that I learned from you is that we kind of started this with all things are spiritual. Your health, your wealth, your business, your personal relationships. If you could just drop one golden nugget, one golden egg on how important it is to focus on each area, or how we can do that, why it's important, that understanding and acceptance that we can't compartmentalize these different areas and say, well, I'm going to separate what's going on in my personal life from my business life, because that's what people try to teach us. You got to keep this over here, you have to keep this over here, and then we're taught, well, men do that better than women. And we can separate all these things. How does that affect us when we separate these things and don't accept that it's impossible to do that, and how it affects us? And then we'll close with that.
Well, you know, like you say, I think it's impossible to separate them, because everything is interconnected. But if there's one thing we can and should focus on, it is the spiritual. And, you know, if you're not religious, I mean, in religion they say, seek ye first the kingdom of God. And I think that's important to understand, because it's really talking about seeking spiritual things. But if you're not a religious person, then you can't use that scripture. But I would still, you know, I still coach people to seek first spiritual things. And what are spiritual things? Things that are good for your soul. And if you always focus on things that are good for your soul, I believe money will come, relationships will come, in relationship with yourself, with others, with your family. All those things come as a result. But I think that focus should be, you know, seeking first spiritual things, you know, and that's, I think, the most important thing. And that's what we need to be passionate about, is seeking things that are good for our soul.
Yes. And finding out what are those things. So many of us, we don't even know what those things are, because we don't even slow down enough to ask.
Well, that's the thing, we're so distracted.
Like, you know? So distracted. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I appreciate your time.
Talking to you. Pleasure.
And
thank you.
I know we could sit here for a few more hours, but we're going to go eat.
Yeah, good. I'm hungry.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.